Marcus cooperated in the end. He sat there, pale under the courtroom lights, explaining in careful words how he had signed trust documents under the impression he was diversifying his retirement funds. He hadn't realized he was underwriting what amounted to a shakedown, a carefully polished scam dressed in the language of community improvement. I watched him testify, and there was a grief in his voice that wasn't just about money lost. It was a hollow, slow-burning grief of someone who realized too late how his signature had been used as a weapon, not against strangers, but against his own neighbors. That grief is going to take him years to wash out of his system, because predators rarely strike from far away. They don't always come as faceless strangers with obvious malice. Sometimes they live next door. Sometimes they host barbecues. Sometimes they wear blazers and carry clipboards, smiling while they hollow out their own streets from the inside. When it was finally over, at least a visible part of it, Lena and I began rebuilding in increments, not with one grand victory march, but with the slow, steady reclamation of ordinary life. The first full night's sleep without bolting upright at the sound of car door. The first morning coffee on the porch without scanning the street to see who might be circling. Our dog, who had learned to startle at the smallest creak of footsteps, began snoring again on the rug, loud and steady, like a lawnmower engine. These were the small mercies that told us we were clawing our way back to normal. It's strange how much tension your body can carry without you even noticing. Weeks, months of constant bracing, shoulders tight, lungs never filling all the way. And then one day, after the storm finally passes, you notice a shift, the way your shoulders sink just an inch, the way your breath comes easier. You realize that what you thought was your natural posture was really just armor. People ask me sometimes if I ever felt guilty. Did I feel betrayed that Marcus had put us in a line of fire on purpose, even if he didn't fully grasp the consequences? My answers vary with the day. On my better days, the noble days, I tell them it was an honor to be part of breaking a cycle that needed to end. On my harder days, the honest ones, I admit that sometimes I wish someone else had bought this house before us, that the fight had landed on different shoulders. Most of the time, though, I don't think about myself at all. I think about Janet, her mug trembling in her hands when she tried to speak. I think about Ruth Ellison, her voice breaking as she described what it felt like to be cornered by paperwork written to sound like law. I think about the Maples, who almost sold their home at half its value just to get free of the harassment. And somewhere between gratitude and anger, I land in the middle, thankful that we were able to do what others shouldn't have had to, and furious that such battles exist at all. Even now, long after the hearing, we still see comments flare up online. Arguments about HOAs and property values, about whether communities stand to protect neighborhoods or weaponize control. Lines drawn between people who think order means safety and others who know order can just as easily be a mask for ownership. Let me be clear. I don't hate HOAs in theory. At their best, they can be practical tools to keep streets maintained, lawns trimmed, lights fixed, and communal spaces cared for. What I do hate is when those associations become costumes, masks that people wear to turn personal bitterness into civic duty. It's one thing to mow the grass at the park. It's another to wield bylaws like a cudgel, to use community standards as a sword against the very people who have the least power to push back. Because order is not the same as ownership. Community is not control. Standards mean nothing if they are only ever enforced downward, never upward, always targeting the easiest prey. A month after the hearing, an envelope arrived in our mailbox. Inside was a simple postcard, no return address, no flourish. Just 3 signatures from families in Laurel Bend and one short sentence. We saw your story, and we're not selling. I showed it to Lena, and she didn't say a word. She just pressed it to the refrigerator door with a small magnet shaped like a red bird. And then we went out front together, hose in hand, watering the elderflower bush a neighbor had given us as a gift. That little plant became a symbol, a quiet declaration that our porch, which had once looked like a place joy wasn't allowed to live, was finally shifting back into a place where laughter, flowers, and peace belonged. I'm not telling you all this because I like drama. I'm telling you because stories like this one are happening more often than we want to admit. We move into quiet streets chasing peace, and when that peace shatters, our first instinct is to assume we did something wrong. That maybe the noise is our fault for listening too closely. It isn't. Sometimes the loudest voice in the cul-de-sac is just a person who learned how to make a clipboard sound like a badge. Sometimes the greatest threat isn't the stranger outside the gates, but the neighbor who learned how to twist rules into weapons. And the truth is, doing the right thing in these situations is rarely glamorous. It's not fireworks and big speeches. It's boring. It's paperwork. It's saving every email, labeling every tab, filing every appeal. It's showing up at one meeting, and then showing up at the next one and the next. It's standing in front of people who smile at you like you're being unreasonable and calmly saying, "That doesn't apply to me," and then backing it up with maps, documents, receipts. The fight isn't cinematic, but it matters. So here's the question I keep circling back to, and the one I want to leave with you. If you pulled into your brand new driveway, keys still warm in your hand, full of the hope that this house will be the start of your next chapter, and someone told you that you couldn't live there, what would you do? Would you swallow your pride, pack up, and leave to keep the peace? Or would you dig in, brace yourself for the storm, and fight, knowing it might get messy before it ever gets better? That's the line we all face sooner or later, whether we expect it or not. The line between standards and control, between neighborly care and nosy tyranny. It's easy to talk about in theory, but when it's your porch, your family, your dog, your sanity at stake, the abstract suddenly becomes sharp and personal. I've spent a lot of time turning this over in my head. Some people think the right move is always to fight. Others think it's always smarter to cut your losses and walk away. I think the truth, as usual, lives in the middle. Fighting is exhausting. It costs time, money, and peace of mind. But walking away leaves scars too. The bitter taste of surrender, the knowledge that bullies grow stronger when no one resists. When I look back on what Lena and I went through, I don't see a perfect victory. I see a messy, drawn-out slog where some days we gained ground, and other days we were too tired to keep up. I see mornings when I thought we'd never win, and nights when Lena reminded me that winning wasn't about headlines or even hearings. It was about being able to sit on our porch again without fear. That's what justice looks like in the real world. Not clean, not complete, but enough to let people breathe again. Enough to remind the bullies that their blazers and newsletters don't give them the right to control lives. Enough to prove that quiet people with binders full of evidence can outlast even the loudest voices with clipboards. The irony is, a lot of people never even saw what happened. They just saw a tidy neighborhood with flowers in bloom and hedges trimmed, never realizing the hidden war playing out behind facades. They'll never know the weight of Janet's shaking mug, or Ruth Ellison's quiet resignation, or the Maple's near collapse. They'll never know how many hours of sleep were lost, how many appeals were filed, how many times we almost gave up. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't to have the world know, but for those who were caught in it to know they weren't alone. Because the fight was never just about us. It was about making sure the next family didn't step blindly into the same trap. It was about turning the community back into what the word actually means, shared care, not shared control. The day after we got that postcard, Lena and I sat on the porch together, the elderflower bush damp from the watering can, the air still cool from morning. She looked at me and said, "You realize this is what winning feels like, right?" And she was right. Winning didn't look like confetti or trophies. It looked like a yard that finally felt like ours. It looked like coffee sipped in peace. It looked like a dog too comfortable to wake up at every sound. That's the kind of victory you can't measure on a balance sheet. So when people ask me if I'd do it all over again, my answer is complicated. Part of me wants to say no, never, not if I could avoid it. Part of me wants to say yes, absolutely, because somebody had to. The truth is probably both. I wish no one had to, but I'm glad we did. And now I turn it over to you. Drop your stories in the comments. Tell me about your neighborhoods, your HOAs, your battles with clipboards and bylaws. Tell me where you think we went right and where you think we went too far. Tell me what justice looks like in your eyes when the bully doesn't shout or shove, but smiles politely and hides behind a blazer. Maybe your story will sound like mine. Maybe it won't. But I think we need to hear them all, because silence is where control thrives, and noise, messy, honest, persistent noise, is how we win pieces of our lives back. I'll be here, probably labeling another tab like the nerd I am, printing one more email for the binder, filing one more appeal just to be thorough. And when that's done, I'll step outside with a watering can, lean down to the elderflower bush, and tend to the little patch of earth that finally, after everything, feels like it belongs to us. Because in the end, that's what we fought for. Not perfection, not power, just the right to call a place home, without fear dresses or knocking on our door.